All right, let's dive into one of the biggest financial stories of the year. It's a massive deal, and it's all about a piece of technology that might be in your car, powering your city, and you might not even know it.
Okay, look at this number, $5.24 billion. And no, that's not how much a company is worth. That's how much was raised in the single biggest stock market debut of 2025. A number this big signals a huge shift in the global economy, and it all comes down to one company.
And get this, the company behind this monster IPO is one most of us have probably never even heard of, KTL. But here's the thing, their technology is already quietly all around us, powering this global shift to electricity. So let's unpack this thing. This wasn't just another IPO. No, this was a total whirlwind of a deal that pretty much defined the Hong Kong stock market for the entire year. What's really wild is just how fast it all went down. I mean, they filed the paperwork in February, and by May 20th, just about 100 days later, the shares were live and trading. For a deal this huge, that's moving at absolute light speed. And to give you some perspective here, that $5.24 billion haul, it made KTL the largest IPO in Hong Kong since Kuaishou's massive debut way back in 2021. This one deal basically breathed life back into the market, making up more than half of all the money raised in Hong Kong for the whole year. So, who is KTL anyway? Forget the IPO numbers for a second. This company is an absolute titan, the undisputed king of the battery world. Yeah, this is what you call market dominance. CATL controls almost 38% of the entire global EV battery market. That's more than double its closest competitor, BYD. Let me put it another way. More than 1 out of every 3 electric cars on the entire planet is running on a CATL battery. And we're not talking about some obscure car brands here. No, we're talking about the biggest names in the business. You've got Tesla and Ford in the US, BMW and Mercedes-Benz over in Germany, Toyota in Japan. They all count on CATL to power their electric cars. And look, you don't have to take my word for it. The company itself put it out there, plain and simple. Our batteries are in 17 million electric vehicles worldwide. That's not some goal for the future. That's the reality on our roads right now. Okay, so we've established they're the king. But how in the world did they pull off a $5 billion deal like this? Let's pop the hood and look at the mechanics. So first off, a key detail. This was what's called a secondary IPO. CATL was already a public company listed over on the Shenzhen Stock Exchange. This whole Hong Kong listing was a really strategic move to tap into a completely different pool of global money. The demand from investors was just insane. The shares they offered to regular folks like us, they were oversubscribed 150 times, 150. And that's not even counting the big guys, the major cornerstone investors who had already committed to buying $2.6 billion worth before it even opened. But here's the kicker. This is probably the most telling part of the whole thing. Even with all this massive global interest, the deal was structured in a very specific way, a way that was designed to intentionally, and I mean intentionally, exclude investors based in the United States. And that points directly to the single biggest risk this company faces. And that right there brings us to the core tension of this whole story. You've got this unbelievable market dominance on one side and this massive geopolitical risk on the other. So on one hand, you have an absolute powerhouse, a market leader with a huge tech advantage. We're talking over 43,000 patents and a client list that reads like a who's who of the auto industry. But on the other hand, it's facing some serious headwinds, like getting added to a U.S. Pentagon list of Chinese military companies and getting slammed with some really punishing tariffs. And believe me, these aren't just some abstract threats. This number, 102.72%, that is the actual real-world anti-dumping duty the U.S. put on key materials that CATL needs. A trade barrier like that makes it incredibly tough to compete in the U.S., and it goes a long way to explaining why that IPO was set up to steer clear of American investors. So with all these challenges, what's the game plan? What are they going to do with that fresh $5.24 billion? Well, the strategy is pretty clear. They're doubling down on global growth and hitting the gas on innovation.
A lot of that money is headed for huge new factories in Hungary and Spain. Why? To be right there on the home turf of clients like Mercedes-Benz and BMW. The rest is going to fuel R&D into the next big thing, solid-state and sodium-ion batteries, which is just crucial for staying ahead of the competition. And their ambition here isn't just about money or market share. Catl is also making this huge bet on sustainability. They've set these incredibly aggressive goals to be carbon neutral in their main operations by 2025 and across their entire supply chain just 10 years after that. That is a huge commitment.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big question. Catl is on a path to become maybe the single most important company in this whole electric revolution, a sort of gatekeeper for the tech that's going to power our future. So, will its sheer market power and innovation be enough to overcome the massive forces of geopolitics? Or are these new lines being drawn around the world going to force the entire industry down a totally different road? That's the question that's really going to define the next decade for all of us.